cool. We're losing it. Let's go back.
Okay, we can take your time. Just whenever you're ready, please.
Hi Lola, I'm Josh. I'm 24 years old and I identify as queer.
You said that you don't really identify as anything.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a really important point that I wanted to talk about today, and you can cut this bit out, but sorry, self-editing. I'll go back. Yeah, there's something really important about my experience of being queer, and I will identify as queer when pushed, that I think is really important because we all grow up learning what's right, and queer is very much about what's not right, what's different, what's queer. And I think how that comes to us is we learn ourselves by comparing ourselves to what we've learned and then taking the parts we like, throwing away the parts we don't. And where you're left with it is queer. It's different. It's separate from who we're supposed to be, who we're with when we're straight and married and we have 2.4 kids and we live in a house in the countryside. Like, it's separate from that. And so it gives us a kind of freedom to not identify as anything. I think there is power in identifying as things, and I don't disagree with people identifying as things, but for me, my power comes from not having to identify at all. I am separate, I am other. Yeah, I think my first experience of anyone that's kind of like transcending or breaking with the gender binary was drag queens and pantomime dames, which are a really important part of British culture. It's kind of this like epitome of dowdy femininity, like the hard put down mum who is frumpy and weird and is to be laughed at. So my first experience, like my primary experience, was of non-binary people for comedy, and I think that stuck with me. While I may try and be glamorous or try and represent something which I think is beautiful, there will almost always be an element of comedy with me. And then growing up, I think I started to get more of an understanding of representation when I got into fashion, because there were models like, and this is probably not anything to be proud of, but Andrea Page, I can't say her name, but definitely remembered her growing up, and it was someone to point to and go, oh, okay, this is how transgender people can be not funny but can be glamorous. And then I got into RuPaul's Drag Race and started understanding more about dethroning the idea of the gender binary, and that kind of representation started really affecting me. I think the first time I watched it, I went out and bought a stick of concealer, like, I'm going to be a drag queen now, and went into school looking orange. Yeah, and then I think really the massive understanding that's come out about the gender binary and the dissolution of it and the places that exist not just on either side of it, whether that's transsexualism or it's being the same thing you were born, being cisgendered. The things that have come out between it are things that we've only really understood in the past few years, and while they've existed, I remember reading an article about one of my idols, a man called Richard O'Brien, who wrote and performed in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, among other like great accolades. He described himself as being a third gender, and as a 16-year-old reading this, I thought, fuck, what's a third gender? That's ridiculous. I think this is probably going to be the most outrageous thing I'll say, because I think it's the one thing that I think that maybe people disagree with or no one else is saying. But I'll get into this. My experience of being trans is that it happened, I'm dealing with it. I am currently in referral process for a low dose of hormone replacement treatment, but these are things which are fine. I'm very lucky to grow up in a time where they are, for the most part, fine. I mean, I get harassment, but I don't take that as something bad, really. When you are queer, when you threaten people's idea of normalcy, you're doing something right. While it may not provoke the right response, you are doing something right. When it comes to being trans and experiencing pushback on pronouns or people identifying you right way or even looking at you properly, because this is a real thing, people's gaze really dictates how you experience being trans. When it comes to these things, I almost get disappointed that people expect so much of others. I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask for it. You absolutely should. If you want people to call you and say, I can go by they, them, their pronouns, that's absolutely fine. I am not saying don't ask it, but when you're disappointed that the world doesn't look at you and bend to your will, that hurts me, because it's like looking at someone being vulnerable and getting shot down. And I'm not saying you shouldn't make yourself vulnerable, because that's the only way we're going to get forward, but it hurts me in a way in which I don't want to perpetuate that hurt. So I don't ask people to call me different pronouns. I don't ask people to refer to me in any which way. Like, it's my business what I'm doing. And I think RuPaul said that in some sense. It's none of your business what other people think of you. And I think that's the truth of it. And while that helps in a negative light, I think it should also be reflected in a positive one, because I'm a bitter, old queen.